We note the recommendations, as I would want to say that I'm very much in a listening mode, Dr. King. We are here really to learn, because by collective wisdom we are able to come up with improved regulations. The one about the number of sites, we have taken that on board long ago. We recognize that we can't export from the multiplicity of sites, and that's part of the reason why there is a certain amount of breaches at the moment, because a container can take up to 2 days to load. That means if it is to be inspected properly, you will have to have a customs officer there for 2 days. And of course, when the customs officer leaves in the evening, in the night, you don't know what can happen afterwards. So that is a challenge, and therefore we have been reducing the number of sites. You mentioned the point about having more persons there other than just one customs officer, and you're very right. That is something that we have recognized. In fact, at one time, one of the conditions for the reopening of the industry was that at least 2 customs officers should inspect a container, because then both of them would have to collude. We also required for the police to be there. Not only the police, but also the users of metals that have been experiencing theft. So, for example, utility companies and so on. It's a challenge, of course, to get the police to be there when you consider the multiplicity of sites all over the country, to have a police officer there when there are, other demands on the security forces. It's not a very easy and practical one. Also, it is not very practical to have the utility companies have officers stationed at each site to observe the loading exercise. So if we are to have this industry, and if we are to enjoy the benefits which it does have, earn the foreign exchange, employment, and all of those things, we have come to the conclusion that in going forward, we have to change the regulatory regime in terms of where people can export from and the conditions under which they can export. And while we have not taken full policy decision on it yet, what is emerging so far is that we are contemplating separating the industry into 2 categories. One, what we call the industrial scrap. The industrial scrap is the scrap generated or produced by companies in the normal course of business. So it may be a manufacturing company, it may be a company that has retired an old factory or machines, components, and so on. For the industrial sites, and that's what the regulation now requires, that you cannot export unless you own the scrap metal. So no company at the moment is allowed to purchase scrap metal and sell it. And we have seen the impact of that. There has been a dramatic fall in the theft of scrap metal. So the big companies that have scrap metals, we are contemplating allowing them to export, but they must export in their own name. We will allow them to use traditional exporters which have the expertise, the equipment, machinery, and so on to do the fabrication, cutting the materials and loading. We'll allow that. But the the exports must be in the name of the company that has the material. Because in the event that we find stolen material, that company is going to be held liable. So that's the direction we are looking at the moment. Decision has not been taken. We'll have to go to cabinet and we may have to do more consultation, but I'm telling you where we are looking, because we'd also like to use this forum to solicit comments. Now, what about the so-called household scrap and miscellaneous scrap? We are now coming to the position that we need to have a few central sites across the country, maybe 3 or 4 thereabout. A central site would accommodate existing exporters. They would have space in the site where they would bring their materials, and the material would be inspected by customs, police, and so on when the material comes in. If there's any material that is suspect, the plan is to quarantine that material and do further investigation. In the event that the material is found to be stolen, the penalty which now exists is $3 million. And of course, that exporter license would be canceled, their tenure in the site would be terminated, their business would now come to an end. We believe that that risk will be sufficient enough to deter the exporter from buying from dealers and other persons materials that could be stolen. We also believe that the vast majority of maybe dealers and exporters are honorable, law-abiding people. But sometimes you just want to have a few people who are renegades, and they corrupt the entire system. What we are trying to do is to make it difficult for those people to become a part of the new regime as we go forward. So the minister is also contemplating having a bond whereby they all subscribe to, and in the event that there is a breach, some of the funds from that, some of the funds taken will be taken from that pool of funds, and they all will have to contribute back to the level of the bond. The idea there is to get some kind of collective responsibility, because if your neighbor, if you know your neighbor is stealing, it's going to hurt you because you will have to pay a part of the bond. Now, we have not worked it out fully yet to see how it can work without any administrative difficulties, but that is a concept that we are toying with at the moment. So these are some of the new conditions which we are coming with, and we have listened carefully, and we will be reflecting on what you have to share as we move forward. Thank you very much.